we're ready to go.
Should be good.
Good to go?
Should be good.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the Morgantown Utility Board regular meeting scheduled for Tuesday, August 10th, 2021 at 9 a.m. The first order of business would be the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of June 29th.
I move for approval of the June 29th, 2021 regular meeting minutes.
I second.
Okay, second and a motion to approve the minutes of June 29. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Minutes are approved. Okay. Second order of business would be the public portion. If anybody in the audience would like to address the board, now's the time. Come forward, name and address, and we'd like for you to hold your comments to 5 minutes or less, please.
Okay, thank you. My name's Mark Solero. I'm one of the owners of the corner of Patterson and University Avenue. As you know, it flooded, seriously flooded, July 29th, and then about a month prior to that as well. I was out of town the first time. And for a month and a half, we tried to get some kind of response from the Department of Highways, and they never wouldn't even return the phone call. I did talk to one of your representatives or one of your field agents, Ken Hacker, who was very good and treated us with respect, returned our calls and all that stuff. But our property is, as you know, right below the university retention pond. We've had water come across that road and flood several times in the past, and I was hoping that MUB was doing something to eliminate that problem. It's been doing it for a long time. This last two rainstorms that came in were, they said, worse than anything in previous, but I don't know how it could be worse than the '86 flood, but that's what they said. And the retention pond has failed twice now. Water came through the side of the pond, across our property, it tore our property, our parking lot completely out. They have barriers in front of our property blocking the use of our property. We have a tenant in there who has a restaurant that's losing money every day as a result of it. But when the second flood hit, that got the Department of Highways' attention because it raised University Avenue blacktop. It put holes into University Avenue, and it was unsafe to drive a car on it. Then over the last week and a half, they came out and they said they're going to develop a plan to replace that. And I went over there day before yesterday, or I can't remember, it was yesterday or the day before, but the Department of Highways were there, and they said they're only going to fix the culvert. They're not going to do any repair work to the box culvert. They're not going to do any repair work to the existing culvert, which he said he knows of 2 holes where it's been in there since I was a young kid. And I'm thinking that if they're not going to fix this is just going to happen again. But what happens, there's 19 utility conduits going through that storm sewer. And as debris floats down through the retention pond and into the box culvert, it gets snagged. The debris gets snagged and then blocks the water. Water came into the culvert and up through our parking lot like fountains. I have pictures. I have a video if you all would like to see the video. I don't know how you could play it on there, but I mean, I can give you a copy or send it to you or something. But Department of Highways isn't doing it. They're saying it's not their responsibility. I asked MUB what their plans are, and they say it's the Department of Highways' responsibility. What I'm asking for today is both entities to work together and figure out who's responsible and get it fixed and get those utility conduits out there. That's probably the biggest problem is the blockage caused by that. I think it would be an easier fix than tearing the whole road up through Kroger parking lot through Burger King and all that, and replacing that culvert with a bigger culvert. Something needs done. We continually flood. Now, granted, these last two are the first time water came into our building, but we had water that high up against the door of the building, trying to block it with, and I have pictures of all this, trying to block it from coming in, and finally it was such a losing battle, we went to the other side of the building and opened that door and let water run right through. That business can't exist like that. We need your help.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
I'm Austintina Lavelle, and I'm also an owner of the property. And I just second everything that Mark did have to say, but we are helpless at the moment. We can't, even if we wanted to put our parking lot back together, we can't. There's no base there. There's nothing underneath the parking lot. And when he says there were fountains, the actual the actual blacktop lifted. I mean, it lifted 12 inches from somebody who was there that told us this, lifted 12 inches off of the property. It blocks an entrance. There is a financial exigency here. It's impacting us negatively from a financial perspective, but certainly the poor person that has the restaurant might very well have to close if he can't continue. But the point is, there's nothing under the parking lot that we can use they're big holes. So somebody owns under it, and with everybody pointing a finger at somebody else, we're helpless at the moment. We have no idea where to go next. And certainly we can't fill that box in with concrete to create the stability that we need for a parking lot. So somebody owns this hole that's under our parking lot, and we're not sure how to resolve this issue. So we're asking for your help. We're pleading for your help.
Thank you, Tina. I think that concludes the public portion. I don't see anybody else out there who wants to address the board. So let's move on to new business. Clean Water Act. So first thing, let me just go. As all of us know, 2020 was a heck of a year. However, for the utility board, Star City and Cheat Lake wastewater treatment plants, it was especially meaningful. Both plants were awarded Platinum Peak Performance Awards by the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. These awards are given to wastewater treatment plants that maintain 100% compliance with permits over a 5-year period. For the Cheat Lake plant, this is the 22nd consecutive year of being recognized, and for Star City, this is the 20th year of perfect compliance. Understand only 2% of all wastewater treatment plants in the country receive 20-year awards. So obviously this is pretty outstanding. What makes this award even more astonishing is that it occurred not only during the worldwide pandemic, but while the Star City plant was undergoing massive upgrades. Despite the threats posed by COVID, despite the continuous construction, and despite the intricate engineering and science involved in switching from dated systems to newer ones, the staff never let us down. This accomplishment is akin to working on a race car as it speeds around the track. Absolutely remarkable. So I'm honored to confer that the Cheat Lake and Star City wastewater treatment plants Platinum Peak Performance Awards to Greg Shelito, manager of the treatment and production. And this award speaks well of the professional competence of our wastewater treatment plant staff, their dedication to protecting the health and safety of our residents, and their commitment to safeguard our environment. So Greg, I'd ask you to come forward and accept these awards on behalf of yourself, your team, and I think I speak for all of the board, offering our sincerest gratitude.
If it's all right,
Job well
I'd
done.
like to bring some of the team up too, because as you so well stated, it was a team effort. No one person did this on their own.
Absolutely. So, these guys all,
Keep going at
This
do one at a time.
is Mr. Jake Fishel.
Yeah, sure, Jake.
He's my assistant, and
Yep.
he's been very instrumental in doing all this. This is Jared Rosada. He's
Hi,
the
Jared.
chief operator at Cheat Lake, and this is Ernie Utter. He is
Ernie.
our new chief operator at the Star City plant.
Okay.
I'd like to mention Charles Nestor has also been very, important in this, because he was our chief operator for the past 2 decades. So he's had a lot of input into this and making sure this happens.
Absolutely. So here's the one for Chief Lake, right? You're the Chief Lake guy?
Could we get a photo with the board, please?
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Get a little closer to each other, guys.
Whole board come over. Congratulations.
Congratulations, particularly as a customer of the Cheat Lake, I'm
there
really
you go.
happy about this.
Congratulations.
Hi, thank you.
All right, get in here. Let's get that. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks again, guys.
Yes.
Congratulations. Job well done.
Good job, guys. Yeah. You have a place to put it now, right?
Yep, we sure do.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate it. It's been a long haul.
Okay. Thanks again. So let's move into the July 29th flood event.
Excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. on July 29th, Morgantown experienced another extraordinary rain event, and we had flooding that occurred in the first ward of Morgantown and Suncrest. We recorded 4 inches of rainfall in just a few hours at the water treatment plant that same evening, and 6.4 inches of rainfall was recorded on Grandview Avenue. To date, we've had about 87 claims filed with our insurance company at the request of those customers who had experienced damages. But we've also informed those customers that it's highly unlikely that any of those claims would be covered by our insurance because it was a flood event, not a failure of MUB system. Floodwaters peaked at 4.5 feet on Pattison. MUB also experienced some damages during that storm event. We've advised everyone to contact Mecca 911 to make sure that they document those damages they had in their homes, and to make sure they detail that with Mecca, because as you know, the county commission has declared a disaster at that time, and I think that's going to be the best for all of our customers that may have had damages to follow that path, as well as ourselves. because we had damages that night. And so, as part of this, looking back and trying to understand these weather patterns a little better, we've asked Evan Hansen with Downstream Strategies to put together a presentation for the board to show what kind of rain event we did have, and a brief of some history of rainfall events here in Morgantown, and some discussion on what can we expect in the future with these kind of rain events. And before we move on to Mr. Hansen, I would like to point out that this morning you've been given a letter from Miss Caroline Esposito asking, talking about the flood event and some ideas that she has that she'd like to convey to the board of directors and to city council.
Okay. Just want to go on to Evan's
Yes, please.
presentation.
Thank you. Is there a preferred place for me to stand to?
No, it's fine.
I think this would be good.
Okay.
I'll move so you can see.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. Obviously, this is a hugely important issue for MUB and for the community. You do the slides? Okay, next slide. You know more than anybody except those people who've been flooded themselves, because you've gotten all the calls. The gentleman and the lady there know firsthand the impacts of these floods as well. And if you go to the next slide, in First Ward, these are some photos that an employee of mine sent me, so from her basement. So, you know, things really did happen that are extremely rare and impact people's livelihoods and people's homes and people's lives. So I think this is a very timely question, not just from the point of view of who's responsible, but more importantly, in my opinion, what's the future going to look like? Because if we're going to have more and more rain events that look like the ones we saw in June and July, we have an issue, a big issue that needs to be addressed. And that's an issue not just here in Morgantown with MUB, but a broader issue across the country and across the world, frankly. So next slide. So what I'm going to do is give a presentation with two parts. First, I'm going to place the recent rainfall in context of the past rainfall that we've seen in Morgantown, to see how extraordinary those events were. And then secondly, a little bit about climate change and how we expect the rainfall to change in the future. So I understand that I'm in the room with a lot of engineers and people who are dealing with water, but I am going to just go over sort of a basic concept here, because it has a lot to do with the charts that I'm going to show. And it has to do with how the intensity of rainfall events are measured. And they're typically measured in terms of a recurrence interval, like a 100-year storm you've heard about, or a 500-year storm, something like that. So what a 100-year storm means is that it has a 1% chance of occurring every year. 1 in 100 chance of occurring every year. And a 500-year storm is less frequent. It has or let's go to a 1,000-year storm. That's a 0.1% chance of occurring every year. So keep that in mind. But then the other thing that's important to keep in mind is that the size of these storms also have to do with the duration of the storm. So is it a storm that lasts for 1 hour, or a storm that lasts for a day? And so I'll be showing some charts and some data related to 24-hour storms, so the total amount of rainfall that falls in a day. But I think, frankly, what's more important here with the storms that occurred in June and July are those shorter duration storms, like a 2-hour storm, because so much of the rainfall fell within a short period of time. So with that, this is data from NOAA, so this is official government data based on rainfall patterns at the Morgantown airport. And it's got too much information on it, but the cyan, so like the light blue curve, which is the one here, gives a sense of what the 24-hour storms are. So like the 100-year, 24-hour storm is about 5 inches. So you got a 1% chance of having a 5-inch storm in a 24-hour period. And you can look these up for different durations. The other thing that's really important to keep in mind related to this data is that we're lucky to have a long data set. We've had rainfall records collected for a long period of time in Morgantown. But that data set is our past data. So these storm intensities are only going to be correct if the future climate and the future weather looks like the past weather. So again, that's what I'll talk about in the second half. So if we move on to the next slide. These are some of the data points picked off that chart. So this is the data point I mentioned a minute ago. So the 24-hour, 100-year storm for Morgantown is about 5 inches. And the 2-hour storm is 2.8 inches. 1-hour storm a little bit less than that. So you'll see in the charts that follow some lines that show these and compare these against the rainfall. And the other background I would give, which I haven't, I should have said at the beginning, is that infrastructure is typically designed for the 100-year storm. That's typically been the number that's been chosen by engineers to be protective enough, because a 100-year storm happens very infrequently. So next slide. And what I'll further preface this with is that there's several different data sources for rainfall amounts, and they don't always agree. And that's going to be part of the take-home message here. And why don't they always agree? Well, they're in different locations, so that's one reason. And so the storm that we saw in Morgantown was more intense in some neighborhoods than others. But they also may use somewhat different methods and things like that. So what I'm doing is I'm not passing judgment on which one is correct or which one's better, but I'm showing you all the data that I have, trying to put that in context. So this is data for the June 13th event, and it's the non-NOAA data. So it's the non-US government data. And the first 7 blue bars here are the rainfall amount reported at different weather underground stations that are in Morgantown. So these are weather underground rainfall that took place on June 13th, and they range from about 2.5 inches down to about 1 inch during that day. The MUB water treatment plant is here, and it recorded about 1.5 to 2 inches. And then this tall bar here is Shorty Anderson's, where there was a gauge that the construction crew there maintains in order to demonstrate compliance with their permits. And they showed about 4 3/4 inches of rain. So again, you can see how variable it is across town. But how do those numbers compare? Well, if you compare them against the 24-hour storms, which are the lines up here, the 1,000-year, 500-year, and 100-year, 24-hour storms, they don't reach those lines. But we know that rainfall occurred in a much shorter period of time. And if you compare them against the 2-hour storms, at least the storm at Shorty Anderson's was not only above the 100-year storm, but it also exceeded the 1,000-year storm. So that was a very rare event. So that's June 13th, and then I have a similar chart for July, if you can go to that one. And this has the same lines across the chart for the 24-hour storm and the 2-hour storm, but it shows that there are a lot of exceedances of the 100-year 2-hour storm. Again, these first 7 or so bars are from weather underground stations, and the last bar here is from the MUB water treatment plant, which had 4.0 inches recorded that day. We don't have any data from Shorty Anderson's on that day. And what that shows is that every station except one, the Westbrook Heights station, exceeded the 100-year 2-hour storm. 4 of them exceeded the 500-year storm, and 2 of them exceeded the 1,000-year storm, if you're looking at a 2-hour storm. So again, it's variable depending on where the stations are located, but it does give an indication that at least at some stations, we had a pretty remarkable rainfall event. And what this also shows, comparing this chart to the previous chart, is that the July 29th rainfall amounts seem to be higher than the June rainfall amounts. And then the next two slides look at the NOAA data, which is at the airport. And this is actual 2-hour data reported by NOAA, so these are the maximum 2-hour rainfall amounts on June 13th and July 29th compared to the 2-hour storms. So what this shows is that, at least based on the NOAA data at the airport, it did not exceed the 100-year storm, although in July it came pretty darn close. And this is not a linear scale, so this is very close to a 100-year storm. And then the next slide goes down to an even shorter duration. This is the 1-hour rainfall amounts that were reported by NOAA at the airport in June and July. And again, they don't exceed the 100-year storm, but they come pretty close. So the next slide. So my conclusions, which I've already kind of alluded to, is that it's very variable across Morgantown based on all the different stations. The rainfall reported by NOAA at the airport did not exceed the 100-year storm, but the rainfall reported at several different gauges and locations did exceed the 1,000-year, 500-year, and the 100-year 2-hour storm. So now I'm going to move on to talk on the next slide a little bit about the future and how the future climate and the future weather is not going to look like the past. Here's some information that I took from the 3rd National Climate Assessment. So this is sort of like an official document put out by scientists. And one thing that people may not appreciate about climate change science is that we're already seeing the impacts. It's not just a question of whether we have good models and whether we're predicting the future, but we're actually seeing the impacts. And what they're reporting is that heavy downpours are increasing nationally, especially over the last 3 to 5 decades. The heavy rainfall events have become heavier and more frequent. These are just 4 ways of essentially saying the same thing. And again, this isn't just based on projections, this is based on data. And the next slide. Again, according to the climate assessment, they do regional analyses, and West Virginia is in the Northeast region. And the Northeast has experienced a greater recent increase in extreme precipitation than any other region in the United States. We're in that region that is not only projected to see these heavier downpours, but are already seeing the heavier downpours. And their key message, this is their phrase, not mine, their key message is that infrastructure will be increasingly compromised by climate-related hazards, including sea level rise and coastal flooding, which fortunately we don't have to deal with, but also intense precipitation events that we do have to deal with. Next slide. And why? Well, in a sense it's complicated, but in a sense it's simple. Just the warmer air that we see through climate change holds more water vapor. And you talk to the physical scientists, the hydrologists who deal with these types of relationships, it's pretty clear to them. And it's a small increase in air temperature results in a large increase in the amount of water vapor that's held in the atmosphere. And how do we see that? We see that as hurricanes and things like that, but we also see that in our part of the country as intense downpours. So my last slide is a little bit outside of the scope of looking at the data, but just thinking about, well, if we are going to see more of these intense downpours in the future, then what? Because our infrastructure isn't designed for it. Well, obviously one thing that would help would be reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and mud could play a role in that, but admittedly a small role. It's a global problem, but it's something that we have to do. And if people saw the news yesterday with the IPCC report that came out, basically the quote was "Code Red for humanity," that
we're in it now. We're already seeing warming. It's measurable. Wildfires, the floods, the hurricanes, all that are climate change related. The only question is, how much further are we going to go? Or are we going to actually find a way to reduce emissions? So that's number one. Number two is to make our infrastructure more resilient. There's been a lot of work in the previous decades with water utilities and others about making infrastructure resilient. In terms of MUB, you've got your MS4 area where you have some amount of regulatory authority. You've got the non-MS4 area that in some places feeds into the MS4. MUB has the challenge of the combined sanitary and storm sewers that would be very expensive to address. You know, there's issues with floodplains and reconnecting floodplains so that when floods do occur, they don't damage property. There's also potentially some practices at individual homes that could be done in order to mitigate the risk. Ultimately, though, it's a big issue, and we're going to need some new federal, state, and local policies to address this, and we're going to need funding. It probably cannot all come from ratepayers. It's too big of an issue to address infrastructure just by increasing rates, in my opinion. Okay, so the final slide is just my contact info. People should feel free to contact me if you have any questions or comments. And I did want to recognize Nicholas Zegg. He's a professor at WVU, a hydrologist, who helped me with some of the data collection and interpretation. He's a really valuable resource to have here in Morgantown and at WVU. This is his body of work over many years is exactly related to these types of issues. So that's all I got. I don't know if you want to have any questions or.
I have one question. So we saw the data from the June and July storms. How does that relate to past storms? Did we have similar events that we were able to realize that, you know, that on June 20th of 1999, we had a 2-inch storm? Do we have any of that? In other words, how does this relate to the history of our actual history?
You go back to slide 5 or so. 2 more. Yeah, let's look at this one. Well, I don't have a chart that shows individual rainfall amounts for different days,
Okay.
although that data is available. But I would point to these lines that show the 100-year storms, 500-year storms, and 1,000-year storms, because essentially what those lines are is they synthesize the data from the entire period of record and then illustrate that as a single amount. And so that's why we compared them against those values.
Right.
Yeah. But they were high. These were high rainfall
I
events.
understand.
Yeah.
But just from the perspective of, you know, these obviously were close to or were over 100-year storms. And over the history, it tells us that that's rare, but I was just wondering if we could locate exact times, because people are telling us, we're hearing as a board member that, you know, you're just passing the buck to the fact that this was a 100-year storm and we weren't designed for that. You know, my response often is, I don't know where this relates to other storms. Was this something that hasn't happened in Morgantown, or has it happened in Morgantown? Have we had 4 inches in 2 hours? And when did that happen? And what were the results of that storm?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good question, and that data exists, so
Yeah.
we can get that.
But there's another side to that data, that is difference in what the structures were and the construction and the infrastructure that was put in or not put in then and now. Because we've had a great deal of growth, we've had a lot of coverage of the topsoil, and I just think, my personal opinion is we don't do enough, not talking about MUB per se, but as a culture in this area, we don't do enough planning.
Well, I think that was where my point was going to be. If we've had these events and they were pre this growth. So then how can we figure out, we had a 4-inch storm, we didn't flood similar to what
Right.
Mark's had. What has changed
What changed,
that
yeah.
would have, that may have caused this event to be so drastic?
Well,
And then what can we do to solve that?
To solve that problem.
Solve that problem.
And I think his point about, you know, we're looking at past data, and if we assume what we're seeing as far as in the environment and the changes that we can anticipate, what we did in the past is not going to be sufficient. And I think that's true of everyone who does construction, who builds, who paves, who does all those things. We've got to look at it in a different perspective and say, we're going to have to accommodate these changes that we're anticipating.
Right. The engineering may need to change.
The engineering, and I think the assumptions will have to change. And I think the planning has definitely got to be a major part of when you pave something or you build a building and you have big roofs and you don't have holding ponds and you don't have floodplains that are managed, you've got to figure out how you're going to do that. And I think a lot of people build under capacity, and I understand it because you're still using an old model. You're using 100 years, which is not equivalent now.
And I think, you know, there's a responsibility the county commission has in this regard.
It does.
Because they have had on draft form for a number of years.
Right, planning.
Planning documents as well as residential development regulations. And I know in the Chi Lake area, there have been significant floodings that have come off of the Sunset Beach Road that actually have led to deteriorated culverts that are maintained by the Department of Highway, including one that's had to be replaced at the entrance to Greystone. That other houses have been flooded in that area, and it's going to continue to do so because of that watershed is feeding major construction activity that's taking place in that eastern part of Montague County that is totally unregulated, to the best of my knowledge, by the county commission.
That's true, and the other part you mentioned is, it's not just the city and the county, it's the state. So
Right.
when you build highways and you have roads and you have culverts and you have utilities running through there, we have to rethink that.
Right.
Well, thank you very much, Evan, and I think it's part of our responsibility as MUB and as leaders that we look at how we do our business as well as how we manage other people's businesses through the engineering criteria and so forth. And I think we need to be upfront and in front addressing the future, because we've done it historically. We're showing it right now with the reservoir. We're showing it with the wastewater plant. We've shown it with multiple projects that we've done to try to protect flooded areas in the
Right.
past. And we just need to continue that being in the front and moving forward, because obviously this is not it's not going to change. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And like Evan said, it's a large problem. It's a costly problem to try to solve. It's not something that our ratepayers are going to be willing to, I don't think, accept that huge number, as well as just the cost of doing it and the inconvenience of doing whatever projects might need to be done for the infrastructure improvements.
But if we develop plans, we will have associated with those plans going forward some cost estimates that then can be used to see how we can come up with revenues to help support those costs, and particularly given some of the federal and state money that's coming along with county and city monies, we can put together a nice little package that would enable us to proceed forward without a significant rate impact on the current customers of the stormwater system.
Well, it's a problem shared by absolutely everybody.
Right.
And if nothing else, this should have pointed out the need for everybody to coordinate their activities and their intentions, because not one of us can do it by ourselves.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the bid on the Meadows Phase 10.
Yes, this project will serve a portion of the Meadows development, which was the former Meadows Ponds Golf Course along Route 7. This work will be performed at the developer's expense. Bids were received on July 8th, and the bid tabulation is in your packet, and staff recommends award of this contract to the lowest bidder.
I have a question about the project.
Yes.
I presume that the design elements associated with this project were developed by MUB in consultation with the developer, correct?
Yes, it was.
In the design aspects, knowing what we recently heard regarding stormwater management, was stormwater management elements taken into account in the design here, even though it is a purely sanitary sewer project?
I would say no, it's just a sanitary sewer project. The on-site developer has a responsibility through the NPDES permit process to maintain E&S controls during construction and so forth, but that would not be part of our review.
I know it wouldn't be part of our review, I'm just curious as to, that's the responsibility of the developer, so that if
Yes.
there is a problem with stormwater management, that should be pointed to the developer and not the MUB in this case.
Okay. So, we're looking for a bid to, or a motion to approve the bid.
I move to approve acceptance of the bid from and award of contract to Stone Paving for the Meadows Phase 10 Sanitary Sewer Project, Contract 5-2021 at a price of $145,948, and authorizing the general manager to execute all documents related to said contract.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the bid from Stone Paving, contract 5-2021 for $145,948. Questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Now, I have a question too. So
Mhm.
I know we go in here and work with these. Is this based on a certain number of hookups for this or
Yes.
service number? So if the developer comes in later and adds to that, and I know that happens, and we get over capacity as far as the project that we have now, how do we deal with that?
If they come back for more customers, we then look at the system again, start over, and if there's downstream upgrades that need to be made, the developer has to take care of those as well. In this case, that was not needed, but if they do another 100 homes, we would look downstream as well to see what we have. If there's a problem, then they would pay for the upgrade.
So it's a reactive situation on our part as we begin to struggle with the volume, then we go back to the developer, or is there a place where the developer has to come to us and say we're adding another 50 or 100 homes?
They have to come to us first.
Okay.
We review all that up front, so they know the entire cost.
Okay, so when there's an additional development, there is an additional working relationship with MUB?
That's correct.
To address that capacity?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's a pertinent question, since this is called Phase 10.
There you go.
Which seems to reference that there were phases 1 through 9 before, and is there a phase 11 and
Who
through
knows?
15
Right.
coming?
Okay. Move on to old business. Mike?
Okay. The Cobun Creek Reservoir project, Kanawha Stone is moving forward with adding earth fill. Progress is being made. It has been a bit slow due to the wet weather, but they are working 2 shifts per day when weather permits. So we are seeing progress, and you'll get an opportunity to see some of that today.
Okay.
With regards to Fike Run reclaim, the contractor has been planting trees and shrubs, and we anticipate they're going to be finished around the middle of August, provided it's not too soggy and hampering their efforts there. Potesta and Associates has completed the as-built survey, and they're completing the certification report that's required by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Are we gonna see a film of that or some kind of a
Yes.
flyover
We,
again?
we will,
'Cause
yes.
I think we should be proud of that. It's a beautiful project. I don't know what the access is to that. Does the public have access to that, or is this private property? How do we deal with that?
It's private property. There's a conservation easement that restricts development, but it's not a right-of-way for the public to
Okay.
be on.
Okay.
It's a private landowner.
Is there a possibility that beaver might move into this environment and start constructing dams?
It's always a possibility.
It's possible.
Okay.
We have a technical to monitor the success of this project, so we'll be on site to see things like that and work with the landowner and DNR to correct those issues.
Catch those little guys and move them on.
Yeah. They're out there,
I know.
and running water does it for them.
Okay, the wastewater treatment plant project at Star City, work continues on digester number 3. Demolition of the existing boilers continues. They are putting down asphalt. The base course is down on much of the plant property, and the renovation of the return activated sludge building is underway. So progress is moving forward down there, and I think they're doing a good job catching up through all this weather as well.
Sounds good. Next is the industrial park.
Yes, the MUBS grant application is moving forward with the United States Economic Development Administration. MUBS staff has completed their review of plans and specifications from E.L. Robinson Engineering. Revisions have been made, and I believe that those plans, if they're not in our hands today, there will be shortly. We have received a permit from the Department of Health, I believe both for the water and sewer line construction. So that's very positive, and we have been in contact with the West Virginia DEP. I think we've seen the draft approval, and so there were maybe a few little corrections there, and we're coordinating with them. So everything is moving, I believe, rather smoothly. We had the opportunity to meet with one of the principals of Project Thanksgiving, as we refer to it, and we were very, very pleased with that meeting. We are very excited about the potential here of the water usage and what they're going to purchase. I think it's an excellent project for Morgantown.
I might note that as I drove in today, coming down from Interstate 68, I noticed that they were burning trees and brush up there. So the land is in the process of being cleared, either for that development or for another development in the industrial park.
I would say that was it, and so it's a very exciting project. Any other questions? Okay. This evening, City Council will have the first reading of the rain ordinances, and so Jeff and I plan to attend in case there are any questions. We'll be there to try to answer those, and so everything seems to be moving forward as well as it should.
Okay. We'll move on to general manager's report.
Okay, on July 1st, we did open up our office with modified hours from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. That seems to be working extremely well. We're servicing probably 7 to 8 customers a day coming in just to pay bills, and then maybe 1 or 2 folks come in for a new tap or something of that nature. So it seems to be working out extremely well.
How's that compare to pre-COVID, as far as customers coming in?
I don't know that number. Maybe Chip could tell us a little bit about that, but I understand that there were times when they were almost standing outside.
Yeah, pre-COVID, our lobby was a lot busier. We had a lot of customers come in for non-payments plus to sign for service for some time. It was a lot busier.
Okay.
Last Saturday, we held the Household Hazardous Waste Day from 8 o'clock to 11. We had some great partners, the Monongalia County Commission, the City of Morgantown, Republic Services, the City of Westover, and the Mon County Solid Waste Authority. And we serviced 477 participants. Folks came through the line. I think longest wait time was about 15 minutes. So that was from start to finish, which all things considered, I believe that was an excellent turnaround. It was very efficient, and the MUB staff that turned out to help did a great job with traffic control and making sure cars were not getting backed up out on Greenback. So it was a great experience.
Given the demand that's evidenced by having this, is it warranted to have it more often over at different times of the year?
I don't know the answer to that. We can explore that and see what the interest of our partners would be on contributing to get that company in twice a year. I think the total, we're looking at our partners contributed about $18,500. Our contribution was about $6,500. So I think a lot of that would depend on our partners' ability to be able to make a contribution of that size to continue.
The reason why I mention this, it's in the middle of the summer. Sometimes people are on vacation, or it's a seasonal downturn in general business activity. If it was held during the late fall, before winter really hits, we might hit a different part of the population that might be interested in participating, or in early spring, different part of the population that would be interested in participating. I just wonder if there are, and maybe you could find this from other experiences elsewhere, if there are seasonal patterns that exist in terms of people participating in these types of events that might warrant having tried out another time of year.
Okay, we can definitely look into that and get back to that.
Is the biggest cost then just this, the company coming in to take care of the waste?
Yes.
Maybe to Tom's point, is there a way that you could have this and then store that somehow for them when they come in? So they don't have to be here, but we have this,
I think that hazardous waste part might create a problem.
yeah, well, I mean, but they're storing it someplace.
They probably do sorting though, I suspect.
They do. They sort right on the spot quite a bit of the material. And then they have the big boxes on pallets, and they're lined with like 10 mil plastic. And they'll have one for paint. They have barrels. They put barrels for batteries. It's truly remarkable the amount of material that comes in here. I was shocked. It's the first time I've participated in, and I was very surprised. Light bulbs, the fluorescent lights, the long ones, boxes upon boxes of those were being recycled. People were bringing in lights that weren't even unwrapped. They were brand new. And so, that big cost. Now, I would say MUB would not have the ability to store that kind of material on site. They even have large totes they bring in where they pour in oils, gasoline, pesticides, wood coating products. I mean, it's really amazing what people will bring in to get rid of. So, but we can certainly look at maybe a different time, how that works, and coordinating with them. And we can also gauge our partners to see if they would be willing to pony up the cash for having this twice a year rather than once a year.
Well, I think, one entity I would ask is WVU, because every spring WVU has this big drive of getting all the stuff from students that they are going to throw away. I think Republic is involved in that to get it out of their waste stream. And they turn around and have the Golden Blue sale out at the Coliseum, I believe. And I can't help but think that many students probably have some hazardous waste that they would like to dispose of if they're not using it in other ways. And
I
having
doubt
it in the book.
that. I don't think anybody wastes that.
Having it in August, maybe they're gone, and so we might miss a component of what they might be getting rid of at that time. So I just asked them if they could be a partner.
I don't know what they do for themselves as an institution.
Well, that's it.
They
I
may
mean,
have.
if they're doing something from an institutional point of view, then maybe we can partner with them on an institutional point of view and leverage the resources, because I know that they're not one of the partners in this activity.
We will.
Okay.
Okay, on the Cobun Dam recreation issue with the city, to partner with the city, on June 30th, Jim Fetty and Jeff Ray and I, we met with Mayor Celine, City Manager Kim Hawes, Deputy City Manager Emily Mazzarelli, and other members of OPARK. We talked about different ideas for parking, picnic tables, trails, how there could be entry for the new reservoir. Of course, this is non-motorized watercraft. That won't be allowed. So we're still in those discussions. I think there's some information that Jim has sent the city or is getting ready to send over to the city on what we had anticipated things would look like after restoration. And so that's in the works right now. And so we continue to work with them and see what we can come up with and maintain those parameters that we've discussed about safety and staying off of the dam and so forth.
Okay.
I have a question about the development of this recreation. It deals with parking. I think there's a danger of having the parking too close to the lake and having the parking off of major roads where they can provide adequate security for what goes on in the parking lots. So I would hope that we end up with a plan that ensures that there's parking available so people aren't parking by the side of the road, but allows for the enhancement of security in those parking areas. So that I think there probably needs to be included in the plan some type of external lighting that would be provided in the parking lot to ensure that nefarious activities do not take place.
What did they do up at Cooper's Rock? I don't know what they have up there as far as lighting.
The Cooper's Rock closes at dusk,
Okay, so that might be something else
opens
to
at
consider.
dawn, but it's gated, so someone has to come in and secure the gate, which is the park ranger's responsibility, is my understanding.
Okay. So I was just thinking it's fairly similar if you've got an open recreation space. It's not unlike Cooper's Rock where you have a large parking lot on it, access.
It could be one of the city police can go out there and secure a gate or something like that, but I just get a little concerned about parking off major roads, having a problem area for nefarious activities.
We get an opportunity today to kind of see how the new road is going to run, and I think, Jim, jump in, but I think a lot of that would be on the DOH decision-making as well.
Yeah, that road is a DOH road, so we can't commit to parking or not. They've looked at some spots below the dam that look like there could be some space, but it was never designed for that, but we'll look at that to see if it's possible.
And just on our internal discussions, we've always thought it would be, sort of a dawn to dusk sort of recreation, not really anything after dark. It's when problems happen,
Right.
of course. So I think there's still a lot of those details to be worked out.
But we don't want it to become the rail trail.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Some parts.
Okay.
Okay, also, as you know, we have submitted a request to the city of Morgantown and to the Mon County Commission for some ARPA funds. we identified a project on the Upper Pocono Run Sanitary Sewer Upgrade and Stream Restoration as an excellent MUB City-County partnership project. So that information has been submitted, and I know the city is going through a process now of input from residents about how to spend those ARPA funds. And so we're part of that process, and so we are moving forward. Originally, we had thought about Baird Street, the sanitary storm sewer, as being part of that, but the storm of July caused such damage, we believe now it's FEMA eligible, because it's in terrible shape. We were there yesterday doing some demo work where concrete broke and was ready to fall into the actual line itself, and so it's a terrible situation there, and so we'll get our project submitted to see if it will qualify and get that line replaced completely. Right now, it's hazardous. The day Jim and I went out to look at it, two people were walking up the rail trail, and they hopped up on top of the concrete line and walked up the line. And so we've put barriers up and signs saying, no trespassing, because it is dangerous. And every time it rains, it's going to erode some more. And so we are concerned about the structural integrity of that line. And it runs straight down into Deckers Creek. So, it's we're hoping very quickly we can get some funding, confirmation to move that project along.
Okay.
Jim, do you have anything to add?
Okay.
And that's all I have for the board this morning. Are there any issues for the board would like to discuss?
I have none.
I have one. First of all, I'm very pleased that the Platinum Awards were given out to the people who were really instrumental in developing that and maintaining the wastewater system. My question is, and I probably have heard this in the past, and forgive me if I've slipped my mind, what sort of general recognition program do we have at the Morgantown Utility Board to recognize outstanding staff on an annual basis? I know we probably have something that recognizes by years of service. Is there a overall special recognition program that we have in place? Maybe I've heard about this in the past, it's just not coming to mind right now.
Well, we have what we call the Attaboy, Attagirl program. And when we recognize employees for going above and beyond, we provide that employee with a little gift card and just a thank you for their good work. It is surprisingly, we do hear from the public about the good work that our staff accomplishes.
Surprisingly?
I say that, it's a little tongue in cheek. Our team does go above and beyond every day. And we do get great feedback, just like the Household Hazardous Waste Day. I mean, the number of folks coming through the line, thanking the staff for holding this event, and a much appreciation to MUB. It's really nice to hear, because it's really and truly the only way that they can get rid of these things. And so that's a big day. Of course, you have a couple folks that aren't too happy because the 15 minutes seems a little long, but mostly it is overwhelmingly people appreciate that program and the work that people do. We recently has received a letter from a customer. She's in her 90s and she needs a walker to help her navigate. And she wrote this, made a phone call to thank MUB for the good work on the restoration of the sidewalk and all around her property. And she even let me know that she went out and supervised and made sure that she added her expertise to that when she was very grateful for the way that it was well taken by the team. And so that whole group of folks got one of the attaboy cards.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is, it would be nice, and I fully appreciate, as to the other board members, the dedication and the skills and the level of service provided by our employees. If on a monthly basis you have formal attaboy awards, if you could just include that in the communication we get as a board, so that we know who's being sort of singled out for a special recognition, or if it's more formalized down the line into an annual award type of recognition program. I think it would be helpful for me as a board member to know who is getting recognized. And in fact, we might be able to have, we've had recognition for people who are retiring, recognition for special programs, but if on every 3 months or every year, we have those people at the board meeting so that we can formally, as a board, recognize them, I think, and I may be speaking alone by myself, I defer to the other members of the board, but I don't think we can recognize people too strongly these days, given the type of environment in which we operate.
Certainly.
Sure. The only thing I have to add, Mike, I guess, is back up a little bit to the flood events. And I would just like to make sure that we do have a plan to have a plan, you know, of what, to review how we do things, both internally and with the developers, and hopefully, what I'm asking for maybe next meeting is to see what we've learned and what the next step might be and how we're gonna move forward to do whatever it is that we decide needs to be done. If it's just physical work, or if it's changing engineering plans, whatever the ideas are.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, you know, we don't want it to be dismissed because it doesn't rain for a while.
Right, it will not be.
I concur.
We will talk about, certainly we've had many internal discussions. We're still responding, our staff still responding to go out and visit customers that experienced the backup and working with them. And we certainly plan to come forward with some thoughts to share with the board.
Yeah. Maybe some prioritized locations that need to be addressed before others, not that one's more important than the other, but you have to prioritize some projects.
And that was the Pocono Run
Mhm.
project. It's one that's been on the books. And we felt like that was just the ideal project for the ARPA funds, and we think that would be a great project to help with some of the, especially with the sanitary sewer, especially because it's old clay terracotta, and to replace it with PVC.
Does that plan involve the DOH at all?
I don't think so.
I don't
Jim, you can
think
speak to it. I'm not aware of any DOH.
If it does, it would be minor, like the road crossings.
But from what I heard from people who participated during the public session, they want to make sure that MUB and DOH are participating collaboratively in the development of longer-term strategies to alleviate the types of events that we have. So if you can, at the next board meeting, give us an update on, and I know dealing with DOH is not always the easiest thing in the world, since everything is micromanaged from Charleston. But it would be advantageous, I think, to know what sort of formal steps have been made working with DOH as it relates to the issues involving stormwater management on or below DOH maintained roadways.
I understand it can be very confusing to people because we have a mixture of entities here in Morgantown that have stormwater. You have MUB, of course, then you have the Department of Highways, that they operate and maintain their facilities, ditch lines and so forth. Then you have private property, the numerous rental units around Morgantown, the parking lots. Then you have WVU, you have WVU Hospital, Mon General. I mean, a lot of large entities here. And to go back to Barbara's point a little bit ago, when you look at, if you look at, I read that this was some of the highest rain amounts recorded since the 1950s. Well, Morgantown doesn't look anything today like it did in 1950. When you look at, there were the fields of grass and golf courses and things that are no longer here. And it's asphalt and concrete. So there are a lot of different partners here in Mon County, and I think that's really going to be a conversation, is getting everyone to the table and seeing what everyone's willing to do to make improvements.
I totally agree, and that's, the challenge would be to get everyone involved in this, to meet together and say, what are the lessons learned and what are we thinking about for the future? And where can we coordinate those activities? Because everybody has a different source of funding. Everybody has a different political base, if you will. Everybody has a different interest in how far you go with planning. And I don't see this as an easy thing to do, but now we have to acknowledge all of us are impacted by this, and we all impact it. So we can't just have MUB say to their ratepayers, you're gonna pay for fixing these things, when it's much beyond us.
Right, exactly.
And I noticed that in the press that there were significant problems over in Westover, which are not covered by our system in terms of the stormwater management.
That's correct.
And yet they are probably going to struggle with how they manage the stormwater system over there. So I don't know what their solution is, but I guess they're throwing it to their city council to come up with a solution.
Well, if we had master plans on construction and standards that were consistently applied across the board, it would be much more helpful. But West Virginians as a whole are very resistant to anyone telling them what to do. And of course, a plan, in my opinion, is a four-letter word, P-L-A-N, and some people see it that way.
It's a different one.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. At least we know right now, if we had better planning, it would have impacted this. So I think that's something we're gonna have to consider. You can't just go through life with no plan.
Okay. I think we can move to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Mike.